November 2024. Welcome, everybody. Hope you're doing well. I'm going to be your host. I'm Dana. We'll get there. Call into 709 589 4406. 709-589-4406. We're in Canada. So, you got a lot going on, right? We're going to talk about Fukushima tonight. We got a bunch of headlines to get through. Really good stories. You got NATO proxy war using Ukraine against Russia, and Russia doesn't seem to be having a proxy war back. Russia's just gone to war, right? And they just used according to Zelensky, which the United States Colonel Wilkinson's was saying yesterday in an interview that Russia should just hit all his hangout spots and get rid of him. He's a plague to the future. Which is was an interesting statement coming from Wilkinson. That's what they do, though. They're war machines, right? You had United Kingdom had given Ukraine Storm Shadow missiles. They got a range of about 250, 300 miles, and they travel at about Mach 0.8 Mach speeds, just under the speed of sound. And so the stories are conflicting. I've seen the videos of Russia's attack upon Ukraine, and it's very confusing because Russia says don't attack Russia, just attack the soldiers on the battlefield. But they're happy to attack anywhere in Ukraine. So why is Russia off limits? Doesn't make any sense, right? There is no rules when it comes to war. And Russia has hit back with supersonic, not subsonic like the Storm Shadow, but supersonic. And just even kinetically, these are quite impressive munitions. They're traveling at such enormous speeds. And there's rumors they got speeds of around 17,000 miles per hour top speeds in some of their munitions. I guess that's going to be launched from space, is it? I guess up into space, and then when it comes back down, it's traveling. Because that's the speed for leaving gravity, basically, a little over that. Clearly, Russia is jacking combatants to go out front line. They're using drones, extremely efficient now after 3 years. They just chase the soldier down and blow him up. I don't know how you can call that a war. I don't know how you can describe that as a war. That's humiliating. That on this planet we do stuff like that. It's humiliating, and it sets a precedence for much more. I can't use the word controversial because it's barbaric to do that. Like shoot a bullet and Buddy Duxie gets away from it, whichever side it may be. There's some hope, right? But when you've got a drone that chases you around till it catches you and blows you up, there's no hope. And they're jacking people with Down syndrome. They're off the streets in Ukraine in order to fill the trenches up. They know there's no way they're going to survive it. They got no training. If you give someone who has no inclinations to throw a punch into the battlefields, they're completely ineffective, right? They're not. And that's why you're not seeing the huge groups of mercenaries headed down there, because wars are not what they used to be, right? And then if Russia is to use the so-called 17,000 mile per hour kinetic weapons, That's the equivalent of a nuclear bomb going off without the radioactive fallout. Now, if they do it into a city, you got a lot of toxic stuff in a city, right? But it's not radioactive. Radioactive is the problem. United Kingdom, of course, had a chance. Boris Johnson had a chance to pull out right away of the war. And there was zero possibility he was willing to do it because the weapons manufacturing facilities, they don't store weapons, they use them up. Right? It's not like, here's the weapon in case something happens. Here's weapons, now go make something happen. And that's why we see so many false flags on the planet. And I actually put together a video a long time ago of Patrick Clausen, who's acknowledging false flags. Just before we jump into the show, let's play that clip. There's a remote possibility I can find it. Well, such is luck, I found it. I'll adjust the volume in real time. This is just a 1-minute video, but it talks about how we get into most of the major wars. And it also talks about Iran. And so what they basically says, if this president's not going to get us in the war at that time with Iran, it's best if somebody else starts the war. That's known as the false flag.
I frankly think that crisis initiation is really tough. And it's very hard for me to see how the United States president can get us to war with Iran. Some people might think Mr. Wilson wanted to get us into World War I. You may recall he had to wait for the Lusitania episode. Some people might think that Mr. Johnson wanted to send troops to Vietnam. You may recall he had to wait for the Gulf of Tonkin episode. We didn't go to war with Spain until the until the Maine exploded. And may I point out that Mr. Lincoln did not feel he could call out the Federal Army until Fort Sumter was attacked, which is why he ordered the commander at Fort Sumter to do exactly that thing which the South Carolinians had said would cause an attack. Some people might think that Mr. Roosevelt wanted to get us into World War II, as David mentioned. You may recall we had to wait for Pearl Harbor. So if, in fact, the Iranians aren't going to compromise, it would be best if somebody else started the war.
Oh, we got no audio. Oh, shit. Damn it. Volume. I think you call it. James Lucid got I'm just rambling on, so I apologize for that to anybody. I put out a rap song, and the rap song, when I listen to it, because I have around 4,000 rap songs in my collection, I have a lot of music, but I can actually see the artist on stage dancing around to the rap music. And the only thing that can invoke that is if it's realistic, right? That's how good the software he's using now. And he's so good at it at this stage. It probably, like, to him, it's probably, I don't know if it's easy, but it works, that's for sure. He's able to do it. So I actually got a permanent link in my description to the best anti-nuclear music I've ever heard. That's James Luce's website there on YouTube. And he put up this song, I went to get his song from last night, and he put up another song about 4 minutes before I got there. And I'm listening to that rap song, and I'm like, oh my goodness, man. It's unbelievable how good that actually is. And so I put a link there for everybody. But there's a link in my description that's there permanent. So every time I post a video, the link is going to be there. Because that's quite the weapon, right? And that's pretty well what we just missed, me saying I had to repeat everything again. Air samples in Tokyo are 270 times more contaminated with Cesium-137 than global weapons fallout peak. And should you avoid Tokyo after air samples show 270 times Cesium-137 than the global weapons fallout peak? Now, personally, yes, of course you should. You should avoid it at all costs. And any food grown there. And if you got loved ones there, you should send them a link to this video. It's time to stop playing around. This industry has gone too insane. And here we go. Let's rock and roll. So much crap to get through. I call it crap because you will too once you watch it. It's just insane how this industry is insane. It can't open this pie hole without lying. Now I got a big pillow behind me. You can't see it. Oh, you might be able to see it there, a little piece of it. But that was the only way I can get comfortable. I got a pillow behind me. Then I got a piece of foam in behind the pillow to curve my spine because I got myself hurt. And it works. So who cares now? Let's go. This is the craziest story. We're going to start off with one of the craziest stories imaginable. Fukushima nuke debris arrives at a lab for a year-long analyst work. It's November the 13th. But they didn't show you this picture. This was reactor 3, the fuel pools, which is around 8 reactor cores. There's 2 of them. A total of around 8 reactor cores. Large reactor cores, pure uranium plutonium, and a plutonium mixed oxide reactor ejected, a running reactor ejected out of the building. But it took them years. They had to spend $48 million to build a robot. And the robot does this. That's it. That's just, calling it a robot is, and Japan's supposed to be the most technologically advanced society in Asia, for instance, with the 3rd biggest economy worldwide, and that's they're going to call it a robot. They really should be ashamed to call themselves engineers. Fukushima nuclear debris arrives at a lab for a year long. It took them years to dig down. But what they didn't show you was these types of pictures. What they do show you is reactor 2. They don't even show you that, actually. They talk about reactor 2, which doesn't look anything like reactor 4 or reactor 3. And these are only stumps. These should have been leveled right to the ground. Remember, they picked up 30 million one-ton bags of radiation, but it took them 2 years to get a sliver, like the size of a grain of rice, when there was chunks 1,000 times larger ejected all over the site and into the ocean. So that's the cover story, right, is to pretend that they're somehow heroes or human in some kind of ways. These people are not human. They don't have any human attributes whatsoever. A dedicated container holding fuel debris. The fuel debris is the size of a grain of rice. Provided by the Japan Atomic Energy Agency. So the idea is to produce all this drama and mystique, because the average person has no concept, because a journalist is going to make sure it's incapable of them understanding. The first melted fuel sample recovered from the crippled Fukushima #1 nuclear power plant arrived at a research facility in Ibaraki Prefecture to help devise methods for full-scale retrieval. Some of these statements had come out, this was the Washington Post 2011, that it would be like Chernobyl on steroids if the spent fuel catches fire. Says a nuclear engineer who worked in an identical plant, and that each reactor holds 3,450 assemblies. The buildings does. And the fuel pools are at the top of the buildings. This is the media. You got ABC Australia, CNN, BBC United Kingdom, CBS, biggest media in North America, basically, pretending they're at the top of the building in the fuel pool. And they said it would be like Chernobyl on steroids. It's infinitely worse than Chernobyl on steroids. And shame on these people for pretending they're on a building. Shame on those medias and those producers and the videographers and everybody else that allowed that to happen. The owners, the advertisers. Shame on all of these disgusting parasites. Really, though. A truck carrying the debris in a dedicated container left the plant at 9:27 a.m. Meanwhile, they got 30 million one-ton bags full of pieces the same size that they picked up in 3% of the land. It arrived at the laboratory. This is in great secrecy, great hush. I mean, these people are insane. That's the best way to describe them. They're so full of themselves, they forget what it is to be a human. At 2:41 p.m., it left the plant at 9:27 on November the 12th. And arrived the same day at 2:41 p.m. Japan Atomic Energy Agency. Whew, wow, thank goodness. Thank goodness. Ow. The Japanese Atomic Energy Agency, the least credible organization you can get when it comes to a nuclear industry. So, that's all wrong. Researchers will analyze the composition and structure of the 0.6 gram sample collected. It's embarrassing. In detail over about a year at the facility in the town of Aurora. There's a little sliver. But meanwhile, this is the reactor cores and the fuel pool reactor cores being ejected out of the buildings. At the same place, right alongside of number 2 reactor. This is number 3. It's right alongside of it. These people are insane. The entire nuclear industry, the only way to describe this is insane. I gotta watch this. I move around. I get animated sometimes, and I move around a bit. And I pay for it. The amount is very small, but we believe it will be enough. These people are insane. It was billions of pieces the same size. It's spread everywhere. It's frightening. And wherever there's cesium, by the way, there's plutonium. And this model of the cesium, followed by the French government, estimated that this plume you're looking at, based on 16 days of Cesium-137, had 1 million to 10 million atoms per cubic meter of air covering the entire planet in 16 days. And Cesium-137, by the way, pulses energy 600 feet every second. It's also known as global warming. Gas, oil, and coal emissions don't make any plumes at all, let alone something that... It doesn't even make a plume that big. It's carbon, so all it's going to do is grow more food, more plants, more trees, more animals, more microscopic animals. Without carbon, none of us exist. So a plume like this, the only thing that produces plumes like that is anthropogenic man-made radiation. Because it's so tiny, but the problem is it got so much energy, and the energy is forever. Even when it gets down to radioactive lead, it's still radioactive lead. And the microscopic animals the most important resource on the planet, and the most important facet of our planet. And you can't have bacteria and fungus without it, and without bacteria and fungus you can't have anything else. And then all the water, fresh water, all the oceans are covered in 16 days. This is a French government, 1 million to 10 million atoms. But if you listen to the nut job nuclear industry, the bizarre moron nuclear industry, the dummy nuclear industry, there's the only way to describe nuclear industry is a bunch of dummies, a bunch of morons. Is the first melted fuel collected from the Fukushima #1 reactor? Really? So you didn't collect anything from Medusa reactor, the plutonium mixed oxide reactor 3. You didn't collect anything from that, did you? Really? How long do you think that's going to stand up in a court with a jury? That statement. The industry is insane. It always has been insane. It's never been challenged in its entire legacy. Not a single time. I can't find a single instance of a program educating the population equal to a single one of my shows. And I've produced several thousand of these presentations and shows. I've never seen another academic out there do it. And that is the most terrifying, most horrifying, petrifying statement. It's humiliating. Again, right? There's the only word, it's humiliating, isn't it? It's unspeakable. It's despicable. It's reprehensible. It's nefarious. It's outrageous that we can't find an academic on the planet educating the population. And I mean, you can't find them. You can find the apologists. You can find the controlled opposition, which is the worst thing could happen to anybody trying to learn about this topic, is they find Arnie Gunnarsson or Helen Caldergott or Christopher Busby's or anything like that. So the worst thing can happen to you. They say a little bit of shout and a whole lot of disinformation, and there's no way for you to make an assessment based upon knowledge. That is the worst thing that ever happened to humanity, is the academic community turned their backs on us. 3 reactors. Well, when you look at reactor 4, that sure looks like it's destroyed to me. How about you? Just because they put a cover over this stump doesn't mean that they're going to be in the fuel pools, because the fuel pools were at the top of the building. And when you look at this, when you look at the building, we know every academic on the planet looked at reactor 4, looked at reactor 3, knew the fuel pools were gone. Yet not a single one has ever come out publicly. Well, that's a lie. There is a couple of stories from way back in the day where they said, I don't believe it. But the academic could have made the assertion, right? Not a conjecture in our opinion. And this is after they allegedly got all the fuel out of the pool, but they didn't clean up that debris. How interesting. Why? Because it's lethal doses. They didn't even clean up the debris on the roof. Why? Because there's lethal doses everywhere. And how can you have something in the top of a building when it doesn't exist and the bottom of it looks like that? Just because you put a cover over a stump that doesn't physically touch it, when the fuel pools are at the very top of the buildings, how can the academic and the journalists worldwide are the ones that, by the way, perpetrated that deception, that deceit, and that dishonesty, that obnoxious, gross, offensive, just spineless. This is terrorism to pretend that the fuel pools are at the top of a building when it doesn't exist, because they're doing it because of the adverse effects from it. Number 1, 2, and number 3 reactors. Again, what about reactor 4? Where is it? They were changing the fuel and doing maintenance, which meant about 1/3 at best of the fuel was coming out of the reactor, which meant 2/3 of the fuel was still in the reactor core, and that there's 8 reactor cores in those 2 fuel pools at the top of the buildings, which doesn't exist no more. So they're very persistent in only saying there's 3, not 4. But don't forget, and they have spent years claiming they got the fuel out of the reactor 3 and 4 fuel pools when they clearly don't even exist. There's nothing left to the top of the buildings. That's where the fuel pools were. There is no top to the buildings, reactor 3 or reactor 4. Right? Reactor 2, you can pretend that it's there, but we know it's not. It burnt constantly for days, and uranium doesn't burn at a few hundred degrees. It burns at 9,000. And so it goes through cement and steel and everything else, like the proverbial hot knife goes through butter. Fukushima debris arrives at the lab after a secret journey. Ha ha! Secret journey. The secret journey covered the whole planet. When you ejected the reactor cores and the fuel pools out of the buildings, and now you're out there saying that you finally got a little grain the size of a grain of rice of fuel, and you're going to go study it for a whole year. You don't show them that, because everybody goes, holy shit, everything's gone. These people are insane, right? And then the journalists are the quickest ones. Their job is to come out and make you incompetent. And you're like, oh, the journalist, she's so pretty. You can trust her, right? But the reality of it is that's a fatal flaw. That's the plan, right? Employees load a transportation box containing the fuel debris into a container in Okuma. And how much money do they pay the journalists for that? Not very much, apparently. Every journalist on the planet is doing it. You are not getting a job unless you're willing to do that. It's unforgivable, isn't it? It's not egregious, it's terrorism. Hey, did you see the robot? Oh, the robot's special. They spent $48 million. They spent 4 years developing it, and here it is. Here it is. You ready for it? $48 million robot. It's pretty special, isn't it, right? What? It's a set of tongs. This industry is insane. To even come out and show the picture. It's one thing to tell the story, but it's another thing to come out and show that picture. It takes an absurd amount of balls right there. It's either you got a bark set of kahunas or you're insane monster coward chicken neck. Most likely the latter, right? Well, one thing we learned about after studying nuclear industry all these years is there's no lack in cowards in the nuclear industry. There's more cowards in the nuclear industry than any other industry on the entire planet. That's a fact. There's their $48 million robot. Set of tongues goes, ink. $48 million. Have a nice day. We love you so much. We love you a long time. And the journalist's like, where's my chunk of the pie? I tell him whatever you want. What do you want me to tell him? $48 million robot got a little piece out of a pool? Sure. There it is, $48 million. That's not actually at Fukushima right there. And the journalist's job is to sell the story. Oh, yeah, it was so difficult. They had to cancel it multiple times. Remember that over the last couple of months? All systems going in like, oh, we got to pull everything back. It's too dangerous. We got to fix stuff there. We can't go putting people in danger. We got our $48 million robot. And the minute that you put that robot, by the way, in the reactor, you can never go near it again. If that top of that, calling it a robot is just humiliating. Those tongs at the top of that goes in the reactor building. When it comes out, nobody's standing up where that guy is to. That's a lethal dose right there. You'll never change the tongs on it again. The journalist's job is to sell you your life and your friends and family's lives so they can make a big fat paycheck. The tongs. Then they got these pictures. By the way, the camera can't work in that environment. You're talking about thousands of sieverts. These people are insane, right? These people are literally insane. We got no volume or what? What's going on here? Oh. No volume. I thought you had no volume. I was going to go, oh shit, how did I do that? It was out of something must have went wrong, but no, it's working. There's $48 million gets you in the nuclear industry instead of tongs. It's so stupid. You gotta be pretty gullible to believe that one. Robot. They call it a robot. All you gotta do is like stick a magnet and drop it down there and pull it up, right? They would have got a big chunk. Magnet under fishing rod. Actually, one of James's songs last night had the fishing man out fishing for an aquarium out in the ocean, which is you would have caught it a lot quicker than they did at Fukushima, by the way. But the journalists like, oh well, we got some bank. Yeah, bandage coming off tomorrow or the next day. Doing really good, eh? But I just don't want to push my luck. I got one slice left there that I want to finish healing over. But it feels good to take the band-aid off today. I had to take the band-aid off and clean up the edges with a razor because this gets so itchy, right? Hooks into the cotton. And that got rid of the discomfort. A robot. If that's a robot, I'm a friggin' monkey. I'm a two-headed monkey. Robot used to remove the debris. And that's the journalist writing those stories, right? Here's Rupert Winfield Hayes pretending he's at Reactor 3 fuel pool at the top of a multiple nuclear meltdown building. He's done the same thing for Reactor 4. Just because he put out those pictures, it means nothing. It's the same as this. It means nothing. Because the buildings blew up, right? The fuel, reactor core, and fuel pools and pellets were ejected all over the site. Right? When you look at the actual Reactor 3, for instance, and Reactor 4, and they're claiming that they finally got a little debris. They're calling it debris in a secret journey, and it's the size of a grain of rice is what they're saying, and they had to do everything was secrecy. They got 30 million one-ton bags they picked up before everybody stopped paying attention. Now they're growing food in it. Wait, what? Nobody's looking. Oh, let's bring it over into the nuclear wasteland, dump it out, and call it a farmer's field. Yeah, it's illegal to live here or come here, but we're a nuclear industry. We're crazy. That's our gig. TEPCO is checking the levelness of number 4 spent fuel pool. The levelness. Let's check it ourselves here. It looks pretty level to me. Yeah, there's about 150 feet of the building missing, but it looks level. These people are insane, eh? The buildings, the guts are at the bottom of the buildings. There's no building left. This is not an industry that has a right to exist. They know it. They're not stupid. They're not censoring me because they got the moral high ground, the moral compass. Should you avoid Tokyo after the year samples showed 270 times Cesium-137 and the global weapons follow peak? If you're smart, really, really, really smart, you will. I screwed that up too, did I? I'm so good at screwing stuff up, it seems, today. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up and click some bells. Give us a comment. Give us a like. I hate doing that. I feel so dirty and cheap every time I do that. That's okay. You gotta do it anyways. I just do it for a kicker. Z equals MC squared means everything with replicating cells has no autoimmune trigger to defend against it. I apologize, I'm on YouTube. You can complain all you want, but there's nothing I can do about it. That's the gig I got, right? Stream's good on everybody's device. That's Yoshida Mashata. Right there. The little monkey. There we go again. Massive radiation leak. Does that look like a leak to anybody? I'm very prejudiced when it comes to the word leak. There's quite a things out there I like to put a leak into it all. In the nuclear industry, I can tell you that much. This is one of the most bizarre. Carbon credit, of course, what do you expect? The safest, deadliest poison in the world. And I really didn't want to do this story. I really didn't want to. For obvious reasons, because I got a tendency to get upset when I see so many lies. But it's like, if you can see past that a little bit sometimes, it's hard for me most times. Today happened to be one of those days I can see past it a bit. But it's so dishonest to come out with everything the nuclear industry writes, every paragraph, typically every sentence. If you want to challenge their lies, it takes forever to get through a story because every sentence is a fabrication of the facts and the reality. Fukushima is the best possible advertisement for nuclear power and its safety. I mean, Mike, like, and they don't put their names on the stories. Sometimes they do, but typically the real bad ones don't. Scientists shocked as the fishery collapses along the west coast. Now, it's the worst we've seen. They're starving. The death rates are skyrocketing. No babies being born. The fish stocks are at an all-time record low. I was on the ocean doing research expeditions at that time. And this is my findings right here. We spent 6 years doing research expeditions. And the species to your left are now officially exterminated. After 6 years of going back, there was no recovery of the species. So I was out there 4 to 5 months a year for 6 years doing research expeditions. The species to your left are exterminated. They never came back because we went back year after year to see if those species would come back. They didn't come back. And we're seeing the same thing now on the East Coast. But the East Coast didn't have this highly visible species, right? But there was, right, there a lot of species. So, and we can't find them either. So the species to your left are exterminated. That's true for the Pacific now. For the tidal zones, which was the nursery, and that's 100% due to the Fukushima radioactive fallout. We know this because we went back for 5 more years after the first year. And that matters. And this is why you're seeing the absurd lies that these people tell, these incredible propaganda. Let me get back down to where we left off here. Fukushima is the best possible advertisement. But sounds like in theory, except that in all of U.S. history, the recorded number of deaths due to the nuclear power is 0. Every fuel pool is hemorrhaging radiation. There's about 1,000 fuel pools at just nuclear power plant sites. And you're taking the reactor cores out, after, chunks of it every 14 months or so, and putting it in a fuel pool. And the fuel pool has no containment, not like the reactor's core itself, right? The containment has a containment. Once 14 months later, you're going to take it out and put it in a pool where it's still splitting atoms forever. The reason nuclear is dangerous is because it's splitting atoms. But they'll never acknowledge that. They'll never say that. They don't want you to get educated on those facets. Japan's National Cancer Center says the number of cancer patients, rose by 865,000 in 2012, a year after Fukushima. But going back to this point here, the recorded number of deaths due to nuclear power in all of U.S. history is enormous. It's just tens of millions in the United States because they have so many reactors and by proxy then fuel pools. The emissions will go right across the whole planet. So the the farms, which are butted right up against these sites, surrounding these sites, for it's really something what they got done, isn't it? In this industry. Like, there's a good case to say these people are insane. Because they just, their entire legacy is predicated upon deceit and dishonesty and lies and genocide and omnicides. Just let me, bear with me here. Yeah, it's hard to appreciate how insane this industry actually is. It's hard to appreciate how insane they actually are. I can't seem to find my stuff I want, but that's okay. I got some other stuff up. I'll take one more kick at it. Maybe I get lucky. One last try. Okay, don't matter. Here we go. I thought I put that, renamed that or something. That's probably why I can't find it. This is Sellafield, United Kingdom, for instance. But this is true for every nuclear power plant. And so if you look at it and you go to the edge of the plant and look out, this is what you see, farms in every direction. All nuclear power plants have that, and dumps, and reprocessing sites like Donneray, Sellafield, La Hague in France, etc., etc. In fact, nuclear is the safest industry in the entire United States, and this is the craziest statement I've ever heard. Working in a nuclear plant is safer than working in a library. This is the craziest statement. 90% of a nuclear site can't be recycled because it's bombarded with neutrons. So how can you work there? 16,000 workers quit. That's how safe it is. Working in a nuclear plant is safer than working in a library, and that's not particularly easy to improve on, he said. There remains a widespread misconception that nuclear plants are ticking time bombs just waiting to level an entire city. And so this is a slander, really, on your common sense. They love doing that narrative where it's going to blow up and take out everything for 100 square miles. Because you don't want to have any connotations of facts. And because the nuclear power plants, the fuel pools have no containment. They're just hemorrhaging plumes all day long. Plumes. Like we're talking about massive plumes from the fuel pools every day into the environment. It's hard to picture, isn't it? But I can bring up a visual for you. In nearly 20,000 years of combined nuclear operations, there have only been 3 core meltdowns. Well, each reactor at Fukushima had around 8 reactor cores. There's 4 reactors, 36 reactor cores melted down, counting the reactor cores that were running. There's Santa Susana, which released 460 times more radiation than 3 Mile Island. In other words, is equal to 460 3 Mile Islands melting down at the one time. And that happened in 1959, by the way. They hid it away for 50 years. The dangers from radioactive particles escaping from the reactors. Radiation near Tokyo at 100 million times normal, which meant you should leave Tokyo. And here's another model, for instance, of just Japan. This is 468 hours, 19.5 days. All the models, and we got tons of models from different countries, all agree upon the radioactive fallout covering the entire planet. Dangers from radioactive particles escaping from the reactor. Fortunately, the release of radioactive material is generally reduced by the nuclear infrastructure that remain after the meltdown. There's people, there's crazy, and then there's the nuclear industry. Nothing screams insane like the pro-nuclear community, does it? Like, there's the media telling you they're 150 feet above the stump there. Well, Dana, that's the media. Why would they lie to you? Everybody would show them up, right? No, it doesn't work that way. They're all bought and conglomerated. That's exactly what happened at the most famous and worst nuclear meltdowns in history, Chernobyl. Chernobyl's bad, but it ain't no Fukushima. In fact, Chernobyl, they closed 9,400 farms was the actual number. And you'll see media, a lot of media will put out this picture. This is simply not true. They call that the elephant foot. That's supposed to be hundreds of tons, representing hundreds of tons, right? They're saying that's the melted reactor core. Like, it's simply not true, and that's simply not true over there. What they done was, they took the original photo, they darkened it, and then they put Dana there. Look, that's me. Ha ha, I'm at the Chernobyl nuclear meltdown. That's all they done, right? That's all that is. So two of us are there now. Look at this. We're both there at the Chernobyl, me and, like, it's absurd because you couldn't get that close without dropping dead. It melts your organs. When he's telling you that 50% of the people that goes there will die, it melts everybody's organs. Nobody's organs is any more resilient than somebody else's or any other creatures. They melt. They liquefy. And typically after Hiroshima and Nagasaki, there's a lot of records showing the victims who are in the radioactive zone itself squat down. That's how they found them dead. They were in a squatting position and they had excreted their guts because it was liquefied. So they found them with their pants around their knees, squatted down, dead. They didn't even fall over, some of them. And worst nuclear meltdown in history. How can you say Chernobyl was the worst nuclear meltdown when Fukushima is 4 reactors and 8 fuel pools at the top of each building? 8 reactor cores in the 2 fuel pools at the top of each building. Just 32 reactor cores. And most likely a lot more than that because they don't have a repository in Japan, let alone anywhere else on the planet. And that's where they're holding the nuclear fuel, which is splitting atoms. And is now, when it blows up, all those particles landing everywhere are still splitting atoms forever. It's a trillion rice size, grain size, fuel particulates in the environment splitting atoms. Think about that statement. There's lots of it went in reactor 1 and 2. There was quite a lot when China's engine deep into the earth, but reactor 3 and 4, it lost their entire inventories out of the buildings at a very high speed in a very short period of time, which meant you now contaminate the biosphere permanently, which compromises all the species worldwide. All other reactor types have a crucial containment dome. Fuel pools don't. Thick steel and concrete lid that keeps radioactivity material inside the nuclear plant if something goes wrong. Yeah, but the reactor containment is at the top of the buildings. Reactor 4, there's no top to that building. Right. And in 2013, that's that picture to your left is 2013. And here's the media above me, behind me, claiming they're in the buildings. But both of these buildings, that's what they looked like in 2013. There is no buildings left. They left the stumps there so they can put a cover on it and then pretend that they were in the buildings that don't exist. Same as they're trying to convince you a robot has gone in there and somehow magically got itty bitty tiny little pieces of fuel after a whole year and $48 million. So reactor 4 to your left, or behind me, they put this containment here over it. Oh, screwed that up, did I? They put this containment here over it. But underneath it, this is what it looks like. The containment is not a containment, actually. This deception, this contraption that has no benefit whatsoever outside of a visual, right? So reactor 3 to your left, they've done the same thing. They just put this contraption over it. It doesn't physically touch it because clearly both of these are too fragile to bear any weight, right? The meltdown of trigger caused a chain of explosions and a massive fire, and the fire spewed at least 5% at the time of Chernobyl, 5% of the reactor core into the environment, into the surrounding countryside. But like we've done huge presentations just on academic studies. And incidents of illegal abortions in Sweden, which is far away from the countryside of Chernobyl, right? Legal induced abortions in Denmark, which is a long ways away from the countryside of Chernobyl. Pregnancy outcome in Finland. Pregnancy outcome in Norway. Pregnancy outcome, infant mortality in Germany. Legal abortions, congenital malformations in Hungary. So suggesting that it's confined to a countryside is another one of their unbelievable, desperate plots that they've been utilizing a lot. Human sex ratio at birth after atmospheric weapons testing. Why do you think they're doing a sex ratio study of all the population after atmospheric weapons testing? Even the stuff they blew up underground, vented up into the environment and left cavities so big that every time it rains in that area, those cavities, that water, radioactive nightmare is being transported to the water tables. It's just the whole legacy of the industry is about how do we kill the water, because that way we guarantee no life in the future. It was the largest uncontrolled civilian release of radioactive material in history. So saying Chernobyl is worse than Fukushima, I think should be a crime. Clearly, right, you got 4 melter reactors and 32 reactor cores and fuel pools gone. And trying to compare that to Chernobyl, Fukushima will start, and not only that, like they can't get rid of the sewage. They can't get rid of the garbage, and when they burn it in incinerators, they can't get rid of the ashes. They can't get rid of the water from the water filtration, water reclamation facilities. Because the sediment from the water recreation facilities is so radioactive they can't use it for anything. It's too radioactive. You want a TEPCO to take possession of it. TEPCO's like, finders keepers. TEPCO shouldn't exist, but they were nationalized, right? Because they were on the stock market. 100,000 atoms a kilogram to be incinerated. You should see the models. I can't find them off the top of my head right now, but the maps of where they were taking this stuff, they were grinding up a billion pounds, is it? And they were grinding it up and shipping it across Japan to burn it in the community's incinerators. And we got lots of headlines of protesters and professors and everybody else being arrested for protesting this crime against humanity and genocide and an omnicide machine. I could never conceive this pre-Fukushima, none of this stuff, that the nuclear industry would take it to those levels. And they revel in doing it, and they revel in doing it too. They take a lot of pride in being monsters. In history, suggesting that Chernobyl was the largest release in history is absurd. And Chernobyl was bad. 3% of the children exposed to Chernobyl radiation while in their mothers were diagnosed as healthy at the age of 7. Chernobyl was brutal. Don't get me wrong. And if you look at the presentations done on the anniversary this year and last year, for instance, you're probably looking at over 1,000 studies. We just blew through them like ticker tape, just to give you a comprehension of how many facets of the ecosystem that this industry will study after nuclear accident. It studies every facet. It finds it everywhere. It assimilates in everything. And doctors in the 50s and 60s described it as a biological weapon. Those who were exposed to 100,000 millisieverts of radiation, the average for a Chernobyl liquidator, saw their mortality risk increase by 0.4%. One of the most egregious lies imaginable is take the heroes and desecrate their heroics this way. That's the standard in the nuclear industry, though, by the way. It despises any heroes at all. It despises them with every fiber, because they can never be a hero. They know that. This is just, there's, I can't remember the exact number, but there's dozens and dozens and dozens of orphanages of abandoned children because of Chernobyl in Belarus and Ukraine. And that there's actually foundations in the United Kingdom that go down and try to bring them a little bit of comfort, and have done over 6,000 of them to children suffering from congenital malformations that needed open heart surgery, have gotten open heart surgery through those foundations. Pretty impressive, because the nuclear industry wouldn't even send them a radio. They have to live in silence. If you live with someone who smokes cigarettes, you increase your mortality risk by 1.7%. I would love to know who wrote that story. I would love to. I would like to meet them. I really, really would. I would love to meet that person that wrote that story. With every fiber in my body, I would like to meet that person. I want to see somebody who's shit in their pants when I walk up to them. I would love to meet them. Columbia medical professor inhaling just one hot particle can cause a cancer. But it's not just cancer. There's heart problems, liver problems, lung problems, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome, schizophrenia. Hi, everybody. Yeah, the Seattle, Washington, and other areas had what they call, they're calling it a bomb cyclone. They're also known as Jerichos, right? And that one was particularly nasty, wasn't it? Last night I was looking for pictures of the old growth rainforest that had blown down on the highways. Pretty staggering. These trees are very old trees, very well seeded too, and yet they came crashing down. It's pretty amazing. Inhaling just one hot particle. How many particles of carbon have you got to inhale before you get cancer? Oh, that's right, you don't. You only got to get one particle. You put 200 million particles on the head of a needle, but you can't see it. It only takes one of them to manifest a cancer, or heart problems, or liver problems, or lung, or respiratory, or pituitary, or thyroid, adrenaline, skeleton cancers. How low doses of radiation causes heart diseases and strokes. Even today, the people living around Chernobyl get about as much radiation exposure as the people in Colorado, where there's low levels of radioactive granite. Really, get about as much radiation as granite, do they? Did you know that you can't eat the boar in Sweden 30 years later, 3 decades later? That you can't eat the reindeer 30 years later in Latvia? That you can't drink the milk in Nigeria 30 years later? Did you know any of that? Does that matter to the nuclear industry? What really cracks me up is this coldness of the nuclear industry, this absolute contempt for anybody that suffers from their poisons. These are permanent poisons. They never go away. The victims, if you incinerate them, you cremate them, you're just going to liberate the isotopes back into the environment. And you do that cycle for millions of years, by the way, till it kills something else. Where probability says we shouldn't be. A quarter century after Chernobyl, an 8.9 earthquake struck off the coast of Japan, shifting the entire country a dozen feet. Yet none of the 11 reactors suffered any damage. Really. Reactor 1 melted down because of the earthquake in Japan, resulting in the first and only triple nuclear meltdown in history. It's 4 nuclear meltdowns. Pretending reactor 4 didn't melt down is really something. Whoever wrote this story is not gullible. They're not naive. They're very aware of every facet of the nuclear industry. You can't write the story, all these lies, without being deeply entrenched in the nuclear industry. Simply, that's the only way it can work, right? They don't include reactor 4 as a meltdown, despite the fact there was 8 reactor cores in those 2 fuel pools at the top of the buildings, and 2/3 of a reactor core in the reactor, and that's all gone. So, but they don't count that, really. It's such a stupid industry, isn't it? The people in it. I mean, you got to be some seriously sadistic, twisted, demented, subhuman type species to pretend none of this matters. Really. And the Japanese are extraordinary, aren't they? They poison everybody in their own country and they have no regret. They don't show any remorse. There was some originally. I shouldn't say there never was. We do have some people that spoke out originally, but they went silent and stayed silent, didn't they? There was no reported deaths or cases of radiation sickness and they loved doing it in the immediate aftermath of Fukushima. They didn't like, I can play the videos of Harvard University talking about multiple tens of sieverts in the plumes going through these communities. By 2012, there wasn't just 865,000 extra cancers. Not everybody got health care. Not everybody was diagnosed, by the way. But there was 13,646 children with thyroid tumors out of 38,000. And pre-Fukushima was 1 in a million. So when you scale it up, there's 358,000 out of a million with thyroid tumors. And their thyroid is only about 2 centimeters. And adults is 3 by 5 centimeters. The child is very small, right? And the child is developing, so their thyroid is extraordinarily important. Which, when you got a tumor on your thyroid from radiation, you're acknowledging now that you're producing radioactive hormones for the rest of their life, by the way. And you know how south that can go. And at the same time, when you're talking about those quantities and those attributes, it's impossible not to understand or recommend or appreciate that they're producing radioactive stem cells too. So imagine how bad it is on the species on top of that. But imagine pretending that didn't happen. That's what carbon².com is doing. And this whole story is, if propaganda was illegal, these people would never get out of jail again. And of the more than 200 workers who continue to mitigate damages on the site, not a single one died from radiation. There's an interesting statement. Does anybody really think that you're going to mitigate meltdowns once the first one went boom? You're not going near that. Your organs melt. Doesn't matter how many degrees you got. Not that anybody with a degree is on that site. It's the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society, the immigrants who don't speak the languages on that site. It killed fewer people than operations that an average coal plant does every single year. When everything goes according to plan. Fukushima is the best possible advertisement for nuclear power. And carbon credit is the best possible advertisement for no nuclear. Because to come out and throw everybody and every creature under the bus so that they can look good to their families is the most dangerous creature we have, right? The most dangerous creature is somebody that is hiding a catastrophic issue that affects every human and every species on the planet. And to suggest that there was no redeeming, no bad attributes from such a catastrophic event, they abrogated their rights. The only problem is it's not illegal to kill you with radiation, and they're taking full advantage of that, aren't they? 170,000 atoms a kilogram in the slag. 170,000 atoms. Think of an atom, a physical atom, and then when it pulses energy at the speed of light every second, that's the Bq, the Becquerel. And slag is where they dehydrated the sewage. And what's left over is called slag, which is 50 atoms a kilogram, and humans lead to irreversible lesions in the vital organs. So for an adult with 50 atoms a kilogram, so imagine how little you need for a child. When an adult with 50 atoms a kilogram, you lead to irreversible. And what's the limit in Japan? The ledge limit is 100 atoms a kilogram. The Cesium-137, for instance, because they're not checking for plutonium. They're not checking for uranium or americium or neptunium or strontium. The obvious conclusion is that nuclear power is better for your health than other choices. Bert and Richard. They had to put him in there for some reason. Is a loathsome. Burning fossil fuel creates another Chernobyl every single day, they said. So now they're saying Chernobyl was so harmless, it's equal to burning coal for a day. Or fossil fuel or something. This is carboncredit.com. That's the definition of insane to make a statement like that. Americans will write their Congress people, certainly, but they'll be begging for nuclear power. No, they should be begging make a law to make it illegal to do what you've done in that article. It's shocking. And we see so much of this every day. How do you ignore it and pretend it's not an issue? 30 million one-ton bags of radiation. Now, these are not one-ton bags, by the way. They're 6 feet by 6 feet by 6 feet. And 30 million of them that Japan has picked up. Disseminated on behalf of Uranium Royalty Corporation. Wow. So that story was disseminated, that's a great word, on behalf of the Uranium Royalty Corporation, which is a stock market corporation. They put out that kind of propaganda to try to get people to buy their stocks. And that is frightening. Speaking of frightening, Yoshibori. The leader is confused after Trump says Fukushima plant land is off limits. This is disgusting. Yoshibori's, man. Has he been the governor for how long? I think he comes up here anyway. Like, he was out there on day one. He never slept for 72 hours. Fukushima Governor Yoshibori doesn't know why the U.S. President-elect Donald Trump believes Fukushima #1 nuclear power plant site cannot be entered for 3,000 years. Well, it can't be entered. Anybody who goes there is going to get sick. Yeah, you can go there, but you're going to get serious health issues from going there. No one should go there. No one can go in there for a lot longer than 3,000 years. They took it out of context, right? How come Yoshibori doesn't do his presentations at that building there? Or at Fukushima itself anyway? Well, doesn't he go to Fukushima and walk up there with a can of paint, start painting it, and tell us that it's not that bad? Well, doesn't he go inside there and stick his head out this hole and see Dana's fear-mongering? Well, that's right, because he'll die before he can get close enough to do it. They put this contraption above it and then claimed that they were in it. Does that mean they're in it? No. Does that mean that they're very sick people. These are very sick mentally. These are sadistic creatures to go pretend that you're in a building that doesn't exist, and particularly when you think about the incredible brutal attributes from doing that. He wants the central government and Tokyo Electric Power Company to distribute correct information about the crippled. Let's have a look at this again. Does that look crippled to your left? That word cripple and leak. And if you go back to the whole history of nuclear and accidents, this is the words you'll see over and over and over. Within and outside of Japan. He wants to disseminate. No worries, man. The media will be happy to come out with whatever narrative you want to say. If you want to say it'll turn you into Superman, they'll put that out in a heartbeat. There's no lie they won't tell for you. Ichibori told reporters at his regular news conference, he must feel like a rock star, does he? Can you imagine? Oh, now they got out. Look at it. He doesn't do that, does he? Because he's a moron, like everybody else in the nuclear industry. You got to sell your soul. You're not getting a job unless you have no conscience whatsoever. He was confused by Trump's remarks. Well, why don't you just show that picture and say he's confused? Because look at it. It's perfect, ain't it? People are not supposed to enter the land around the Fukushima #1 plant for 3,000 years. That's 100% true. Just because Japan sold out the victims, that doesn't mean that there's any... It's just because you're a monster and you're willing to harm people doesn't mean that it's acceptable or that there's no harm from it. Currently, there are thousands of workers at the #1 site engaged in cleanup and decommissioning efforts. No, there's not. What are you talking about? You really think these people are faking being on top of the building because it's thousands of people who work there? They're not. There's 70 reactors in the United States just like this, and they're at one of them. They're not in Japan. And they're not workers, by the way. They're the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society and the immigrants who don't speak the language. When you go to the building to the left, if you stare at that, if you pop around the corner and go, boop, you got a lethal dose. You're going to die that day or that hour. Because the neutron bombardments, the beta rays, the alpha shines, the gamma shines, the X-rays from that site itself, ground zero, there's not thousands of workers. These are the homeless and the victims of society. They don't have a clue they're at a nuclear meltdown. They don't read papers, the majority of them. And a lot of them don't even speak English or Japanese. Yeah, there's thousands of them in paper suits. Really? We harassed them years ago so much in a short period of time. They actually came out with a story and said he burnt 7,000 of these paper suits every day in their incinerators at the site. They built another incinerator, by the way, at this site. Why do you need a new incinerator? A massive one on top of that at a nuclear meltdown site, I wonder. What they're doing is unconscionable, and it's not sustainable, it's not tenable, and that there's nothing good going to come out of that, only heart problems, liver problems, lung problems, respiratory, pituitary, massive Alzheimer's, massive dementia, massive diabetes, massive Down syndrome, massive Down syndrome, massive Down syndrome, massive liver, lungs, respiratory, pituitary. Hello? Hello? Yeah, massive Down syndrome. That was just a crank collar. Crank collar. We get a lot of crank collars. How many did we have the last night show? Quite a few, wasn't it? When he appears as a guest on the Joe Rogan Experience podcast, he was talking about his policy on nuclear power generation. When Trump had a dialogue with billionaire businessman Elon Musk, who claimed he flew to Japan when Fukushima happened, rushed down into the evacuation zone and went into a farmer's field and started pulling stuff out of the ground and eating it on live TV. That's how Elon Musk claimed that. November the 12th marks the 10th anniversary since idiot Bori took office. At a time, the prefecture was facing a decades-long task of decommissioning the nuclear plant. Devastated in the 2011 East. The government looked back on those 10 years saying, they feel that time flew by, but at the same time, these 10 years were rich in content and fulfilling. We're rich in content. You 865,000 extra cancers in your country because you're a monster. You have 13,646 children out of 38,000 with thyroid tumors because you're a monster. You got 14.2% of every 100,000 children being born needs open heart surgery. That's 14,200 children out of 100,000 needs open heart surgery to correct congenital malformations. You really got to be an incredible monster to do these things. We don't got anybody else in history to compare this depravity to. Jiji Bori also discussed the decommissioning challenges. The work included removal of the nuclear fuel. The fuel was ejected from the buildings. Like he does press conferences all the time to reinforce the propaganda. There's reactor 4, there's nothing left. There's reactor 3, there's nothing left. You really truly can't be a human to do the stuff that he's doing, right? The meeting in March 2045 deadline to ship contaminated soil from Fukushima interim storage site to a site outside the prefecture. They're not shipping that stuff anywhere. They're cutting it open in Okuma, which is joined onto this fish plant. That community is abandoned. They're cutting the bags open and dumping the 1-ton bags into the ground. Yeah, hello. Crank collars, man. It's crazy. This absurdness, eh? I never seen nothing like that before, except for last night. So that's a caller saying that never happened and that never happened. Should I give them airtime? It still has a long way to go, Jiji Bori said. I'm determined to move forward on a long and difficult journey to reconstruct the Fukushima. I mean, my goodness. You're going to reconstruct the nuclear wasteland and then let people come bring their children, loved ones there, and get sick from it. Clearly, he's got shares in the pharmaceutical companies. He's his third term as the Fukushima governor. Nobody else wants the job. He asked if he was seeking a fourth term. That's shocking, isn't it? Asked to seek if he'll seek a fourth term. Yeah. Who cares, eh? No leader in Fukushima is fully on board with the water dump plan. It's quite the interesting statement from 2021. They never stopped dumping it. The tanks are empty. The tanks were all built in 2013. If you fill up the tank, the problem is if you fill up the tank, how desperate are they though to keep calling you like that? If you fill up the tanks, and let me run you through that stuff. Just let me explain that to you. There is no filtration system. You can't filter something so tiny you can put 200 million atoms on the head of a needle. You can't see it. So you got to filter everything. You can't not filter everything, but you have to capture everything. You can't actually filter anything with those particular attributes, right? Just hang on a little. I'll just walk you down that little section. That's pretty rough, isn't it? Anything to keep you guys from understanding the truth. So here we go. Don't worry about it. I'll deal with it here in a second for you. Here we he's, There we go. I got the ringer turned off. I hate doing that, right? But the nuclear industry can't stand the truth. TEPCO to abandon the Uriva system, which is like the ELP system, 2014 August, it has never been used. The same thing for the ELP system. They can't bring the water under control. In 2014 in April, the ELP system is yet to function reliably, but it didn't exist in 2014. They didn't so-called build it until the beginning of 2015 before they finished it. There's parts of that site where they don't even have control over. TEPCO says the groundwater bypass operation in 2014 not having effect. It's where they're going to direct water around the site so it didn't flow through the reactor sites. That didn't work. They said they were going to build a fence, but they said it was going to cost $1 billion. But of course, you can't build a fence to keep radiation in. It's absurd to suggest you could. These were all just lies to pacify the victims, the permanent victims they create. They couldn't build a bypass operation. They couldn't deliver on the promise to install a fence. The ice wall operation simply couldn't work. They had 260,000 people work on this ice wall. That's what they said, right? And when you done the money that they spent on it and divided it by 260,000 people, it meant everybody made $1,100 each if you didn't build an ice wall. So clearly that's not true. The Siri system, the Curian systems, you can't filter radiation because first off, if you did start trying to filter the water, we're talking multiple sieverts per hour per liter. If you try to filter that, the filter is so radioactive after 10 minutes, you can never get back in the building again. Even if the filter was 6 feet thick lead, you still couldn't pull it off, see? The pipes would be too radioactive to walk past or walk over. Right, you would, like the tanks themselves would have to be 16 feet thick lead because you're talking about several million sieverts per tank. You're talking about pouring water over nuclear meltdowns. You're going to be picking up the fuel particulates. If it settles in the bottom of the tank, then you're going to have a criticality in the bottom of the tank. You're going to have a chain reaction because you're going to have gammas, alphas, neutrons, and betas settling down on the bottom of the tank. So you see particulates too. So you couldn't possibly do it. It can't be done. The whole idea of that was you didn't think it went into the Pacific Ocean, right? TEPCO plan to dump water stored at Fukushima into the Pacific. And the plant had already released enormous amounts of highly contaminated water directly into the ocean from a plethora of leaks from the reactor buildings. Now, a single government leader in Fukushima Prefecture supports the central government's plan to dump the... Now, they call it treated, but you can't treat it. Right? You can't treat that. You simply can't treat it. Evacuation orders to be lifted before the radiation is purged. Try wrapping your mind around that statement. These are insane. Like, they picked up 30 million one-ton bags in the first number of years. But that's symbiotic. It was 3% of the land, the habitable land, where they want to move people back into. Thank goodness only a tiny population moved back in there. And where they wanted to grow food to. And they're growing food in a nuclear wasteland, surrounded by nuclear wasteland, but the food is banned by 55 countries and 14 prefectures. The whole story is quite fascinating, really. But just get an eyesore of this one coming up, these couple of pictures. And this to me speaks volumes of how insane this industry actually is. It's growing food right alongside of 1 ton bags of radiation in a nuclear wasteland for harvest. Growing food right alongside of 1 ton bags of radiation. Right, they're cleaning up farmland so they can grow food, but you can't clean it up. It's radiation. So 97% of the land wasn't touched. So the minute that you have a rainfall, everything is completely contaminated again. But the problem, real problem on top of that is that the reactors are still melting down, still hemorrhaging radiation into the biosphere. Difficult return zones are the light orange. And these, like North America, we call them nuclear wastelands. In Japan, it says difficult to return. We'll just pretend we cleaned it up and then you can go back and don't worry about it. We wouldn't lie to you because we're the nuclear industry. And if the nuclear industry, if you know anything about the nuclear industry, you know that it's going to lie to you. When it comes to worthless people in our society, the nuclear industry is at the very top of that list. The government is planning to create new rules that allow the lifting of evacuation orders in areas affected before they are thoroughly decontaminated. You can't decontaminate a nuclear wasteland. I don't know how many tractors and plows and backhoes and trucks you got, and homeless and destitute and victims of society you got. It simply can't be done when the reactors are still melting down. This is NAMI, which is 7-8 kilometers away. We're talking 30 million 1 ton bags. 30 million. And then the area wouldn't be used for residential purposes. Well, what's the purpose of letting people go back into a nuclear wasteland? Municipal government would have to decontamination is necessary. Another consideration is whether the municipal government have plans for using areas such as building parks. Well, if it's a nuclear wasteland, you don't go there. Calling it a difficult to return zone, it's still a nuclear wasteland. We've seen radiation levels, you said, fall under 20,000 microsieverts. So millisieverts is energy. Microsieverts is energy. Becquerels is physical atoms. Anything that's not right at the site is physical atoms, which means you can breathe it in, you can ingest it, you can eat it, you can drink it. It's in your laundry, it's in your dishwashing, it's in your dishes. So when you clean your dishes, it's in your baby milk, your mixed. Like this is not where you want to go. This is why we got a poll to try to help people appreciate. Should you avoid Tokyo, which is 240 kilometers away, after the air sample showed 270 times Cesium-137? That was the global weapons failure peak. It was a million times worse than that. Like the numbers, we got the numbers. It's when I say it's a million times worse, that's what it is. Right? They're being genuine, saying what they're saying. Even in areas where evacuation orders have been lifted, only about 20% of the residents has returned as of April. Only 20% of the victims who don't know any better, who put their fate into an industry that is out to get them, doesn't make it acceptable. But $28 billion was spent on picking up 30 million 1 ton bags. $28 billion. Which would be equal to 5.6 gigawatts of geothermal power in a nuclear wasteland. We're just talking about farmers' fields and little communities. These people, you can't clean them up. It's contaminated just as bad in the very next day. So get this. This headline is the most insane headline conceivable. Ministry to test growing vegetables on cleansed soil. You can't clean radioactive soil. It can't be done, right? So they were using it, the original stuff, they were burning it for energy, growing it and then burning it. You're just going to liberate the isotopes back into the environment. You can't destroy it in an incinerator. And reusing soil decontaminated following the accident on farmland. In Lydia at Fukushima Prefecture, despite strong public opposition to the proposal, environmental ministry will soon start a trial demonstration to confirm the safety of growing food crops in soil decontaminated. Will be conducted in the Nagadoro district in Lydia, which is a nuclear wasteland of Fukushima Prefecture, is designated as a difficulty return zone / nuclear wasteland, where radiation levels remain high. So they're going to grow food. They're going to take the 1-ton bags, cut them open in the nuclear wasteland where you can't live, and grow food. How the hell did we ever get here? How did we ever get this stupid, I wonder? So 5,000 becquerels, 5,000 atoms or lower per kilogram. This with during the time of cesium, though, they're refusing to acknowledge there's another single isotope on the entire planet, only cesium-137. So 5,000 times 66.6 to get a square meter is 333,000 atoms. That's far past the definition of a nuclear no-go zone, which at a nuclear plant would be 180 atoms per square meter, not kilogram, but per square meter. So divide 180 into that, and that's how many times they're above what would be considered a nuclear waste, nuclear no-go zone at a nuclear site pre-Fukushima. It's stunning, the contempt they have for humanity and the 8 million species is stunning. Decontaminated soil is currently stored at an interim storage facility of Kuma, Futaba, which are both joined on to the nuclear plant north and south. And these are abandoned communities. And they're cutting the bags open in the abandoned radioactive wastelands, dumping it, and then growing food in it within sight of the ongoing multiple nuclear meltdowns. Someone needs to stop these people. These people are insane. The law stipulates the final disposal of the soil should be conducted outside the prefecture within 30 years from 2015. They're growing food in it, for goodness sakes. Like, to put that sentence there is so confusing to anybody that's not familiar with nuclear that they walk away scratching their head, wondering why they even tried. They said the total amount of soil stored at the facility is expected to reach 14 million cubic meters. They've actually picked up 30 million 1-ton bags. 30 million. And the ministry is considering reusing the soil to reduce the amount of soil that needs to be disposed of. They're going to grow food in it because they want to reduce the amount that they have to dispose of. They're already doing it, see? They never stopped growing food in the nuclear wasteland. It was banned by 55 countries for a decade. Certainly Canada didn't ban it. Canada removed all restrictions in 93 days. So Japan could only ship the radioactive food for the first decade to Canada, and they did. Think about this statement here. The contaminated exhaust stack at the Fukushima plant finally cut in half. It was around the stack. It took them a year or something to cut it. It was at 10 to 25 sieverts at the bottom of it, which is 3 sieverts is a lethal dose. 10 sieverts is like a sniper's round. 25 sieverts is just absurd. It's a lightning strike. And how can you get on top of the buildings when you can't even go near the stacks? Right, so they built this contraption above it and then claimed that they were getting the fuel out of the pool in 2021. And just because they done it, that doesn't mean that they actually did, right? They allegedly got sandbags in the tunnels, right? And the sandbags are multiple sieverts. First off, you can't, if there was multiple sieverts, you can't get down there and take a picture. You can't put a camera down there and actually get a picture. This is the high temperature incinerator buildings, which is right south of Reactor 4. It's right alongside of Reactor 4. Reactor 4, as you know, doesn't exist. Cesium levels in fish in the Fukushima lakes and rivers 2020, 9 years later. Time through Minima Soma, which is a nuclear wasteland on a large scale. Surveyed for cesium levels, not uranium, plutonium, americium, neptunium, strontium, or stuff like that, but cesium. Accumulates in freshwater fish differently in lakes and rivers. This was a study they had done. And how easily cesium is taken into the body is determined by what the fish consume in lakes. Well, just being in that environment is a nuclear wasteland on top of that. The bioaccumulation they're talking about is impossible not to happen, right? And then when you eat it, it doesn't mean they're going to die right away. It doesn't mean you're going to die right away, but it's going to compromise your immune system right away. Because when radiation's in your body attacks you with white blood cells for the rest of your life. So, and it's in your body as pulsing energy explosions every second. And so it can, gamma cesium-137 will pulse 600 feet. So imagine that's in your body as pulsing, wrecking chromosomes, DNA, cells, everything else. Your body tries to repair that every second, the millions of damages, cells and chromosomes and DNA. And at the same time, it has to attack the source and try to build a sarcophagus around it. You call it a tumor. That could take a long time to manifest, right? Or diagnosed or whatever. There was 865,000 extra cancers in the first year, and that's why. Because they were producing more white blood cells than red blood cells. So they lacked oxygen and nutrition. And then were diagnosed with leukemias, I guess. The discovery could be used for estimating how the cesium levels is lessened in each fish species. Cesium. And look at this cesium, cesium, cesium. Cesium, cesium, cesium. Cesium, cesium. And so the idea is to make people incompetent, incapable, and argumentative with each other over cesium, rather than... Cesium is very important, don't get me wrong. There's 1,000 fission products you have to be worried about, and you have to put into that equation. You can't just base the contamination on cesium. It's 100% criminal what they're doing. Costly cleanup work fails to lure the residents back to the nuclear wasteland. Thank goodness. But the media got no problem showing up. Right, you can see the cameras there. You can see all the media. To see the gate removed and to try and trick people to coming back into a nuclear wasteland. And they would have driven past millions of one-ton bags to get to that spot. If that's not concerning, what actually is, I wonder? If that's not one of the most frightening things conceivable, what actually is? How do we ever get to the stage where your enemy is the people that are supposed to be informing you? And that's a journalist and an academic and a scientist and the government agents. They are the most dangerous creature we've ever seen, is the nuclear industry, the pro-nuclear community. Their disconnect from a moral compass is complete. And you'll see the journalists. You're like, oh, well, they really throw themselves into the job, Dina. Yeah, the incredible deceptive world of the pro-nuclear community. They look normal, they sound normal, but when you look at what they're actually doing, how is it not a crime? Because it's not illegal to poison you with radiation. That's the problem. It's not a crime to poison you with anthropogenic man-made radiation. It's not illegal. Congress, parliaments, the Diet in Japan, the politicians don't have the authority to make it illegal to poison you with radiation. Only regulatory agencies of individual countries has that authority, and they are not doing it under any circumstances. It's never going to happen. They'll lose their job. All right, they're there to make money. They don't care about you, and they're going to make the money. Fukushima is just a fraction of its former self, and large parts of the town remain mired in heaviest fallout from the... Calling it cripple when the buildings don't even exist is located 4 kilometers southeast of the train station. The incredible disconnect, though. The journalists, they seem like just wonderful people, right? Incredible educations. And they got that job. They went and got that education to get the job to come out and lie to you and leave you vulnerable to an industry that is genocidal and omnicidal. Fukushima officials envision about 2,000 evacuees will return to live in right alongside of ongoing nuclear meltdowns that will never stop melting down. And that figure is considered overly optimistic despite representing less than 30% of the Fukushima pre-disaster population. They got millions of one-ton bags stored there, and they're within sight and direct radioactive fallout from multiple ongoing nuclear meltdowns. Entry is still prohibited because of high radiation levels. You can't mitigate a nuclear wasteland. You simply, when the whole country is a nuclear wasteland, how do you mitigate that thing? To make the place livable again in a 5.6 square kilometers. You can't take a section of a nuclear wasteland because it's airborne and dig up all the topsoil, knock down all the buildings. It doesn't matter what you do. Whatever you try to put there is going to become immediately heavily contaminated. And so this industry desperately needs people to speak out against it, just get articulated. I provide you with so much information for so long that I know the regular people come here. There's no one going to beat them in a conversation, I can tell you that much. Following the magnitude 9.0 Great Eastern Earthquake Tsunami, they always put that narrative in there. 7,000 of the residents were ordered to evacuate, but it was too late. They were contaminated. They always wait till it's too late before they evacuate them. That way they make sure they're sick, and they're too sick to complain for the rest of their lives, right? And these sites are massive sites. TEPCO is not a decommissioned authority. It's never been left holding any kind of authority after this melted down. Now, this is an industry of stupid. Like the moron was calling me over and over earlier, right? These are morons. They get paid a lot of money, too, to be the moron. And that's the best they could do, so that's what they do. It comes natural to those people, I notice, too. When you talk to them, and I've talked to some of these morons, we got videos of it on the site here. They're morons, right? They're very dangerous ones. Fishermen of Fukushima free to ship all catches of fish, 2020. Why would you be fishing after multiple nuclear reactors detonated? The complacency is complete, right? You see it symmetrically throughout the entire population almost. They have no sense of what's really going on. They're not capable of comprehending it on their own. They're simply not capable. And the industry is quite aware that it's called social engineering. New agricultural minister makes the first visit to this is a story from a few days ago, 2 days ago, yesterday. New agricultural minister makes its first visit, because it's not a human, first visit to Fukushima. The Japanese agricultural minister, Taku, on Wednesday made his first visit to the Fukushima prefecture yesterday since he took office this month, holding talks with local business owners Why don't you go to Fukushima nuclear meltdowns and climb up on top of the reactors and show us how safe it is? What I found shocking during the talks was that there still seemed to be reputational damage. Reputational damage. Well, you picked up 30 million one-ton bags. Just because you paid a journalist to write those laws don't mean that you have a moral compass or a moral high ground. Or that you're not a criminal. You're 100% a criminal. Same as the journalist and the academic. It's a crime to be silent as far as I can see. He indicated the government, and I can quantify that in court, I bet you. He indicated the government will work on measures to deal with the reputational damage over the release into the sea of the tritium. Do you know the 30 million one-ton bags, there's not a single one of those bags they said was full of tritium? You can't filter out the radiation from the tanks. The tanks are empty. They're probably full because you had 50 tanks shift a few years ago during a major earthquake just off the coastline. So I'm sure you filled them up so they wouldn't have that happen again. A full tank is not going to shift. You can't fill those tanks up with anthropogenic man-made radiation because you can't get back on the site. If it does that with a single tank, you couldn't build the other tanks there. That's simple logic, right? So the agricultural minister goes to a nuclear wasteland, talks about tritium, because that's his job, is to go there and talk about tritium. Truly one of the most despicable people conceivable to do what he done. And this story is insane. Standoff as Canada's Yukon Town Council refuses to swear an oath to King Charles. Well, we're not under the monarchy anymore, we thought. But every council in every community in Canada has to swear an allegiance to King Charles, the British monarchy. Imagine that statement, though. We think we're a free and independent country, but yet every council, every police officer, every government official has to swear allegiance or they can't keep their job. And right now, there's a group of people who don't want to swear allegiance, and if they can't come up with another way, they're going to have to walk away from their job in the next couple of weeks. The council of a town in Canada's Yukon Territory has been locked for weeks in a bureaucratic standstill after its members refused to swear a mandatory oath of allegiance to King Charles. So how is Canada any different from Britain? We think we're independent, but we're certainly not. When every government official, every law officer, every government agency, every council, the council in every community has to swear allegiance to the monarchy. It's just heartbreaking. I'm in Canada. I find that absurdly offensive. And if an alternative can't be reached by the 10th of December, a couple of weeks, a by-election is required and the mayor and the councillors would forfeit their seats. They would lose their jobs because they won't swear allegiance to the monarchy. That is unbelievable. That is unbelievable. We made it through the show, I guess. That's the show for tonight. And we would have made it this far if I didn't put that big pillow behind my back and another piece of foam behind it. But that worked. It was pretty bad there before I started the show. I'm still hurt, eh? I've still got a long way to go to recover from 9 days ago. But we're back. I'm back. I'm staying back. If I can't do a full show, I'll do half a show. I'm doing something every night. Well, 5 days a week. This is typically the last. I'll take tomorrow, Friday, Saturday off, and Sunday I'll be back again. And I got around 600 headlines gathered up in the last 9 days that I'm probably never going to get to. But I got them all gathered up anyway. And I remind everybody, I put a link at the beginning of this video to go over and listen to James Lucett's latest song. There's a permanent leak link in my description now. It'll always be there, to James's site for music. And I put a link to his latest rap song. It's just amazing what that man has got done with music right now in the last little while. It's pretty special. Nuclear rap. You can come over and listen to it. Let me see what we got done here. Oh, I haven't got the audio. Let me play a little bit of this for a second. I know most people don't like rap music, but this is different. This is really good, actually.
Let's go! World's a time bomb, bitch! Hey, new game! New game! New game! New game! New game!
Click clack, they stacking warheads high while I'm in the trap, selling wages to survive. These suits talk shit, push buttons, watch us die. I'm ducking the block, missiles light in the sky.
Man, what's the deal?
They cashing in trillions, we scraping for a meal. They sitting in bunkers, safe from the blast while we count seconds.
It's really good.
till the shit
What he's doing
collapse.
is just amazing. He's got all kinds of different genres. He's got tons and tons of different genres. And he's using new software that is incredible. There's no way you can tell the difference now. And I don't know how he's doing it. I tried it. It's pretty complicated. If you stay persistent at it, you'll start to get the hang of it. But he's just using the stories, right? To link the words and the stories and everything else to common sense. And then putting it into different genres. He's covering it all. You should be downloading it and converting it to MP3 and sticking it on your nephews and nieces and children's phones. Some of it they'll throw away, but lots of it they're going to keep it. And it's quite a weapon. Music is one of the most perfect weapons you can create. Music, right? It's a very, very powerful weapon. And you just need one hit. That's all he needs. There's one hit to get the momentum. You'd be surprised how much you can do with some kind of momentum like that. Because young people love music, and I mean, this stuff is really top notch. There's not a rapper on the planet who will listen to that song and won't know that that's not incredible. I can tell you that right now. Alrighty, let's close down the poll. Poll. Here we go. My back is pretty rough right now, but it's not. I'm glad we made it through. Should you avoid Tokyo after air samples show 270 times just the cesium? Forget about the uranium, plutonium, americium, neptunium, the strontiums, all the other nasty, horrific isotopes. If you only look at cesium alone, you still should avoid Tokyo 100%. Then global weapons fall to a peak. If you're smart, you will. At all costs, you will. Alrighty. Good night, everybody. Hugs for everybody. Last week, 2 weeks ago, Tabitha donated 100, and James donated 400. I forgot to mention that on my show last night. And James Lucid, I'm talking about. Same guy's making the music. Incredible music is also helping to keep this whole operation moving forward. It's pretty amazing. The whole story is amazing on its own. But I consider music a weapon. I'm going to play another one of my favorite songs, for a lot of people too, is just one of James' earlier songs. We're going to play one of his earlier songs about the guy who was phoning me all night. We call him Calm Down Charlie. He's an unbelievable degenerate parasite. And James put out a song that's, some of the best songs on the planet have been written in 3, 4, 5 minutes. And people say, I could have done a lot better than that. But the reality of it is, this is fantastic. We'll see everybody on the next show. Sunday. Our show starts Sunday to Thursday. Unless there's something else happens, I'll see you on Sunday.
In the Tokyo Bureau, swirling smoke and neon beams. Chicago division, fueled by heated dreams. Calm down, Charlie calls in, voice smooth as silk. Says, Dana, you're dreaming, don't cry over spilt milk. On Dana Durnford show, the chatter's turning wild, but Charlie shoots it down with that cool cat style. Unit 3's no killer, no harm to see life. He chuckles in the static, cuts through the strife. Oh, calm down, Charlie, with his nuclear charm. He says starfish are just fine, there's no alarm. His words dance on airwaves with a confident glow. Calm down, Charlie steals the whole radio show. With a snap and a grin, Charlie's voice so clear scatters the dread, dispels all the fear. Mux didn't hurt, he croons with a sigh. Science is for thinkers, not a whim or lie. Though Dana and the crowd may shout and roar, Charlie's unfazed, he's heard it all before. His swinging rationale, like a soothing song, says, hold on to logic, we gotta stay strong. Oh, calm down, Charlie, with his nuclear charm. He says starfish are just fine, there's no alarm. His words dance on airwaves with a confident glow. Calm down, Charlie steals the whole radio show.